Hey everyone, this is Ethan. Tonight we're going to be looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, but thanks so far for all the hits on the Panthers, the Broncos, and the Bills. Keep those going, keep those accumulating and just circulating around the internet. I definitely think that the Bills one is probably the best I've done so far. I like the Panthers one. The Broncos one I'm a little bit iffy on. I might actually revise that a little bit later in the game because I'm not thrilled with some of the things that came out on the video, and I think that there are probably some new paths of research that I could have taken with that team that I did with other teams that I did not do with the Broncos. So maybe a little bit later I'll revise that, though I do still stand behind the Daquan Bowers pick. Anyway, on to Cincinnati. So Cincinnati is a funny team. And there are a couple of things when you're mocking the Bengals or looking at what they're going to do in the draft that you should know. They don't trade picks, and they stay in the South and Midwest with their guys. Other than maybe the occasional flyover to USC, because USC has some really athletic guys who the Bengals would be interested in, they stay in the South and the Midwest. The last Northeast player that they took in the draft was Villanova tight end Matt Sherry in 2008. And before that, it was Penn State safety Ethan Kilmer in 2006. So they don't often venture outside of that southern Midwestern and occasional USC boundary. I would keep your picks targeted to there. Of course, the Bengals don't care at all about character, at least not that much, especially when looking at draft picks and the kind of talent they have there. They've taken on guys like Adam Pac-Man Jones, Terrell Owens, guys who are cost-effective because of their baggage. There will be some guys who slip in this draft because of their baggage, and Cincinnati will jump all over them because they're willing to take that risk. Because these are talented guys who Mike Brown says, why not get them for the right price? So definitely, if there are some guys who are slipping because of character issues, I definitely look at them in some of the Cincinnati picks later in the draft. So looking at their first round pick, there are a bunch of guys who I can see them taking. First of all, on the defensive side of the ball, Nick Fairley. Of course, he has some character issues, as we all know. Some questions about his work ethic and some questions about his mannerisms on the field. But he's really talented as a penetrating defensive tackle. And he's a pretty good fit for what Cincinnati runs. They do have some great talent at that position right now with a couple of other Southern guys, so I'm not sure they're going to take Fairley, and I'm also not sure they're going to have him BPA. But I think that he's worth thinking about at least at the position because he fits a lot of else of what the Bengals do. Patrick Peterson, definite possibility because of his talent and also because the Bengals might be lacking at that position in a couple of years. However, I think that with the depth of this cornerback class and with the talent of some of the offensive players who the Bengals might have a little bit higher on their board than Peterson, I don't think he's going to be the pick, but he could be the pick. Wouldn't surprise me. He has that amazing athletic potential that would make a team like the Bengals make him their best player available. So, definitely bear watching. Offensively, you got AJ Green, Julio Jones, and Blaine Gabbert for me. I don't think Newton slips past 3. If he does slip to 4, he could definitely be the pick for Cincinnati. The funny thing about the Bengals is that they're actually switching to a West Coast offense with Jay Gruden sort of taking over the reins. And Julio Jones is a better West Coast receiver than AJ Green because he's bigger, he's faster, he can break tackles, he's better after the catch, and he's big enough to block. AJ Green's a sensational receiver, but he's a much better fit for a vertical down the field offense. And I think that's where he'll end up in the NFL, unless Cincinnati takes him. And I've heard things that Cincinnati is interested in A.J. Green. They want to revamp their receiver position with T.O. and Ocho Cinco sort of being not sensational last year. T.O. had a lot of catches, but he didn't have that dynamic explosiveness that they were hoping he would give them when they sent him in the offseason. He was more of an accumulator or a vacuum for balls than a consistent big play threat. And even in terms of 10 to 15 yard gains, he wasn't so great at that. He was more see the ball, maybe catch the ball, go down. Did not get a lot of yards after the catch last year, and a lot of that may have also had to do with Carson Palmer not being a good quarterback, which I'll get to in a little bit. But they still need to improve at the position, at least somewhat. Definitely could afford to get younger alongside Jordan Shipley and Jermaine Gresham. So Green and Jones are both possible. I would have Jones ranked a teensy bit higher than Green, but literally neck and neck for the Bengals. However, I think the pick's going to be Blaine Gabbert at this point. Not sure, but I they need a QB. And this is the kind of team where unless they go for a guy like Vince Young, which is a possibility because Young has that sort of character question about him and definitely has a ton of talent and also has a rapport with guys who are already in the organization on the team, I think that Gabbert would make a lot of sense for that pick because he has the ability to play West Coast. He threw in a lot of short passes in the Missouri offense with Gary Pinkel. And he just has a lot of upside. And I could totally see him being Cincinnati's pick. I think that the two routes they're going to go, they're either going to go with a guy like Young in free agency, maybe a little bit on the troubled side, but a guy with a lot of talent, and then take a receiver in the draft like Julio Jones or AJ Green. Or they're going to go with Gabbert and sort of build from scratch from that perspective. I think Carson Palmer is out of here. I think he gets traded for something. I don't know what he's going to get traded for, but I think he made his bed and is going to have to lie in it. And he was not good last year. He hasn't been good for the past couple of seasons. But I remember reading an article on Football Outsiders with Aaron Schatz that Palmer not only was near top of the league in interceptions, but also, I believe, second behind Mark Sanchez in dropped interceptions. So he had a terrible, terrible season last year. And he hasn't been good since that knee injury. Unfortunately, Kimo von Oelhoffen probably ended the heyday of his career. So looking past the first round pick, the Bengals, of course, go BPA. My sort of way of mocking the Bengals is if there's a player who's slipping and you think in your head, wow, this guy has slipped a lot. I wonder when he's going to go. There's a pretty good chance that the Bengals will look at him and maybe even take him. If they don't happen to pick up Young and they draft a receiver in the first round or some other position in the first round, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a great dilemma early in the second round where they have to debate whether to take Ryan Mallett or Christian Ponder. And on one hand, you got Ponder, who's a really good fit for the West Coast offense. On the other hand, you got Mallett, who has all of this potential, except he's more of a vertical quarterback. And I would not be surprised at all if they took Ryan Mallett, because I'm not sure how much attention the Bengals even pay to scheme when they're picking, because a lot of the guys they take, they seem to value talent above fit. And if a guy is really, really good, they will draft him, and then they will worry about what's going to happen. So if they don't take a quarterback or sign one in free agency in the first round, I think Mallett could be a very good possibility if he slips to the second. Some other guys I could see going to the Bengals. Chimdi Chekwa really intrigues me as a mid-round selection because he's the kind of guy in a deep cornerback class who might go a bit late, but he's a Ohio guy, went to Ohio State. He's really athletic, and they're going to have a need at that position in the near future because they might lose Leon Hall in a couple of years. Jonathan Joseph is up in the air to an extent. So I think that Chekwa is a definite possibility for them. They may take more than one wide receiver in the draft. Torrey Gurley, maybe later on. And I think I've used Torrey Gurley in a lot of my write-ups so far for the various teams, just because he's such an interesting prospect. He's so big and so strong and has great hands and is a really intriguing athlete. And I've used him in a lot of different outlines so far. You'll probably be hearing his name come up again. He's a possibility of a little bit later in the draft. At the safety position, I could see them making some picks there. Quentin Carter could be an intriguing addition. They already have a pretty good Oklahoma safety back there, but Carter would just be one more who could sort of fill in the void. And I could also see them taking a linebacker or two. Ross Homan of Ohio State is an intriguing guy who they could look at. I think that you're going to, basically, when you see the Bengals draft, you're going to see them take a lot of guys who you were familiar with in college, who you weren't so sure about in the pros, and then you'll see that Cincinnati took them, and you'll be like, hey, maybe these guys could work out. Cincinnati will not mortgage talent for anything else. They will take talent over everything, and that's the most important thing. And that's one thing that I admire about their drafting strategy, is that they say, you know what, we have to take some risks, and we're totally willing to do it. And of course, last year, Carlos Dunlap had a great season at defensive end. And Michael Johnson has been progressing pretty well for Cincinnati also. So I think that they'll continue that talent-based evaluation system, that they will say, this guy's good, I want him, I'm going to take him. And I think that this will be an interesting draft for them. And I can't wait to see what they end up doing. I think a lot of it will have to do with the sort of flow of the draft as it goes along. We'll see who ends up getting taken a little bit earlier than they should and who goes a little bit later. So that's all for now. Bengals are done. That was a lot of fun. If you have any questions, please tweet me at Ethan Ham. Feel free to spread this video around, get it on as many boards and media and whatever as possible. And I'll be back tomorrow with the Cardinals. And that's one team where I think we have a pretty good perspective on who's going to be their first round pick. But we'll see. So I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.